Shire folks have been so comfortable for so long, they don't know what to do. These words in the Scouring of the Shire really struck a note with me, and they are but a few in that chapter that rings dreadfully true in today's times. The Scouring of the Shire is the penultimate chapter of the rather famous Lord of the Rings trilogy of books, and tragically it was left out entirely from Peter Jackson's equally famous movie adapting those books. Perhaps, had they been included, a lot of people would have realized the predicament facing our modern world a lot sooner, and we would not have been quite so comfortable. As the Scouring bears a striking and profoundly terrifying resemblance to our own predicament today. Downright prophetic, in fact. And it also suggests some solutions to our problems. That, too, may very well be why the Scouring of the Shire was not included as well. Because back in the glory days of 2001 to 3, none of us, much like the hobbits when they left the Shire for the first time, could possibly imagine just how bad things could get. We were comfortable, and we would remain so for a very dangerously long time. And that is not at all an exaggeration, now is it? Who, after all, in 2001, could in their wildest mushroom-fueled dreams imagine that in a decade or two we would be arguing about whether or not men should be allowed to use women's bathrooms? Specifically because women are on YouTube, after all, and that too is another sign of the times, are afraid of being sexually assaulted. Yeah, it's almost enough to make me a feminist. As history has proven, too, that placing men, who often act out of fetishistic reasons, in close proximity to actual women, well, it often has predictable consequences. And on that note as well, who in 2001 could possibly have predicted the headline, "Woman raped by a male inmate in women's prison has to refer to her attacker as she/her in court." When we left the Shire, you and I, and everybody watching in the 2000s, the world was a very different place. So strange and distant does it seem to us now that it has taken on an almost mythical aspect, as if we can't quite truly believe that a time existed when our greatest worry was deciding which brand new, amazing video game to play next. Maybe some Baldur's Gate 2, or Majora's Mask. What about Jet Set Radio, or Deus Ex, or Hitman, or Sacrifice, or Diablo 2? Hell, it is all just too much in the span of a single year. Let's just settle down with that new and chill game, The Sims. All whilst The Sopranos was on television, or if you wanted some humour, you could switch on Malcolm in the Middle, and the next year this cool World War II show called Band of Brothers was coming out. Fuck. God can keep the land of milk and honey. I want to go back to the 2000s, when entertainment was endless. And more importantly, of a quality we can scarcely even imagine today. Hell, this year's premiere entertainment event so far wasn't even televised, as I would have dearly loved to see them tearing down that set. And I've talked about this on multiple occasions previously as well, that when modern people go back and watch all entertainment, they suddenly realize, wow, they've been missing out. And, on the topic of politics, what politics? You mean the West Wing series? It was pretty good as well, mind you, as, well, we had no reason back then to engage with politics, none whatsoever. It was a silly thing that old men worried about, and in fact, in most geekdom spaces, talk about politics and religion was practically banned. And moral philosophy? Are you utterly insane? Why would anyone ever engage with such incredibly boring and outdated topics? And today, my job is to talk about politics, morals, and philosophy on the internet. We all assume any new piece of media is going to be hot, cum-inflated sewage infested with man-eating rats, and it is considered downright and deeply laudable for a film to just be a film instead of a propaganda piece. The point I am so determined to hammer home is that by the time we return from our seemingly endless adventures in video games and television, the world we once knew was no longer there. The only remnants of it now are fading memory and a damn near universal desire to just turn back the time and return. We need to go back. Sadly, however, bending the temporal time stream over a barrel and making it our collective prisoner is still beyond humanity's abilities. Instead, I and you have spent the last decade plus trying to fight back against a creeping fog of corruption. Actually, our war has lasted for longer than the War of the Ring has. But to return us to our actual topic, what does this have to do with the Lord of the Rings? A lot more than you might think. So let us now get to the Scouring of the Shire. Now, Tolkien himself claims that the Scouring was always intended to be the end of his book, that he knew this was how things was going to wrap up long before actually getting there, even if some of the details, like the identity of the villain, fell into place quite late on in the process. And it was very much so intended to be a final moral lesson about responsibility, to wrap up the epic story. And Tolkien claimed that it was not a political commentary on post-war Britain, which may well be true, but as sure as second breakfast really should be a thing, it is a commentary on today's society, and a particularly brutal one as well. It begins with the four hobbits, Merry, Frodo, Sam, and Pippin, returning to the Shire, only to find it much transformed. They are stopped in the dead of night by a border control point, one explicitly constructed to keep hobbits from moving about uncontrolled. Even as they will learn later, the occupying force of ruffians move about unchallenged. Finding this outrageous, the four hobbits quickly subdue the guards and learn the sorry state of the Shire. A greedy hobbit, Lotho Sackville Baggins, motivated by pure avarice, had been buying up huge swaths of the Shire, some with his own money, but more again with funds funneled in by a strange foreign power. This traitor, along with a few willing collaborators, are selling out the Hobbits' homeland piece by piece, handing over control to those with ill intent. We have plentiful examples of this happening in our time as well, but that, if anything, is just the tip of the iceberg, as the traitors grow ever greedier. Already eager and willing to sell out their own homeland, they don't think twice about staffing their industrial empire with foreign manpower. Or as in the case of the Shire, importing human ruffians to bully the hobbits into working the fields faster and harder. These new masters of the Shire, foreigners and big men, not hobbits at all, walk about as if they own the place, robbing and thieving from the collective. Gatherers go around claiming a share of all the harvests and produce, food, beer, tobacco, etc., claiming it to bring it all to a central storage point, where the wealth of the Shire is exported and sold to others outside, increasing the wallets of the traitors and feeding the avarice of their external trade partners. What little is left to the hobbits themselves is then further reduced by another group of enforcers, sharers. They collect what little is left, insisting that in these hard times caused by scarcity, everyone must give up what they have so it can be distributed fairly and equitably. I am sure it will shock you to learn that by that they mean all of it will end up in the sharers' own pockets and warehouses. Gee. Groups of strange individuals taking from the common man, whilst claiming it's all for the good of everyone, and stating quite unequivocally that this is a good thing for them to do. Well, it might be challenging, but let us see if we can't find some sort of equivalent to that in our modern day.
So this person crossed into the United States from the border and then was able to identify herself however she would like, and then with the United States tax dollars, she was able to begin the transition phase from man to woman.
How's your day going? We are here because trans people need a place in the world. We are here because we have rights, okay?
Where are you guys from?
Venezuela.
So did you do all this here in the United States?
Yes.
And did the government pay for you to transition?
If you wanna go to doctor, speak with me about whatever you want make in your body, in your face, breasts, implants, and other tips to plastic surgery.
And the government will pay for it?
Is, for me, the only country that the government pay for a plastic surgery. In Venezuela, for example, the government don't pay absolutely nothing for you.
Free freaking out that trip. We have one for asylum thing.
So here people can get free HIV testing?
Yes, and if they're young, between the ages of 13 to 34, and part of the trans community and a person of color, they also get a $25 gift card.
And here at the parade, you can receive all sorts of free goodies from the stands and the New York City social workers.
Oh, little variety.
What kind of variety you guys got going on right now?
We have some extra large, we've got like super thin, we have some ripped ones, we have some flavored ones, we have like regular ones.
Oh, I'm probably an extra large. Can I get those ones?
Yeah, hey, take as many as you want.
Oh, thank you so much.
All for you. Why go to Walgreens?
Why go to Walgreens? Anything comes up, Brian, get free everything.
Make absolutely no mistake, this is thievery just as bold and brazen as what the ruffians do. If anything, odds are the ruffians enforced a far lower percentage of taxes on the hobbits than the Western nations' tax services impose upon us today. Here in Norway, we start at a straight income tax of 22%, which can increase to 39% if you earn too much money. And God help you if you run a company, as that's an additional 22% tax on top of it. Furthermore, we have a 25% sales tax on all goods and services. We also have land tax, building tax, various fees on cars, property, etc., and of course, a wealth tax. If your total assets, cars, house, etc., exceeds $200,000 or so, the government charges you a flat 1% tax on your total assets as well. And much like in the Shire, I never see a dime of that ever again, as practically all of it is spent on social and health services that overwhelmingly go to the invading ruffians. This does not seem very fair, does it? Not much like sharing at all. And many hobbits, too, raised an eyebrow at this, and asked for an explanation as to why this was the way things were supposed to be. What was so equitable about this? Those hobbits were swiftly dragged off to the lockholes, to serve as examples to others. To make absolutely sure nobody else starts asking any silly or offensive questions. To help with the arrest rates, the new powers that be have introduced dozens of new laws and rules to the Shire, seemingly intent solely on fabricating new reasons to punish the hobbits. Hospitality has been outlawed, the size of fireplaces regulated, and movement is restricted, requiring hobbits to explain to the sheriffs where and why they are going anywhere, including criminalizing the most hobbit thing of all, eating extra food. All of these new laws and rules are enforced by the sheriffs, hobbits who have been either forced into service or were once proper sheriffs in the Shire that once was. Now they are trapped inside of an organization that oppresses their very own fellow hobbits. Many of these sheriffs themselves are shown as hesitant, ashamed of what they have been made a party to, but they are unable to find a way out of their situation. No doubt internalizing all manners of excuses for why they continue to enforce blatantly wrong rules, clearly designed to oppress their own. And if anyone still foolishly feels the need to speak out, a net of informants and snitchers will report it all to the boss. And punishment, of course, is collective. Yet again, the echoes of our own world are hard to miss. Deafening, if anything. From disillusioned law enforcement to the crazed near-religious persecution of anyone that dares question the narrative. Hell, I myself, just a week or so ago, depending on when I upload this video, was mentioned in the same breath as Jeffrey Epstein in a Norwegian news article. No accusation is too insane to try and use against one's political enemies. No smear too utterly crazy. No classification too wild or outlandish. The left wing has called so many people Nazis so often that that word simply has no meaning now, and so they're clearly reaching for a new one. Not as racist or sexist or homophobe, and a dozen other words whose only purpose was once to be used as cudgels. A role in which they still honestly fulfill as well. As I say, these words have no meaning as it relates to the internet, sure, but people are being arrested for hate crimes, made-up legislation created solely to enforce the progressive orthodoxy on an ever more rebellious populace. And it needs not even be mentioned, but hate crimes are of course tied, inseparably so, to the idea of liberalism itself. It is literally the criminalization of non-liberal points of view expressed in the public space. That is as good as the definition of a hate crime. Yet, reality simply cannot be suppressed. No matter how heavy the hand, it is simply impossible now to ignore the creaking and the cracking coming from the shattering foundations of what is increasingly obviously a fundamental failing of a far too liberal worldview. As the enforcement grows ever more strident, it grows ever more blatant, and no amount of shut up, bigot, racist is going to stop the common man from noticing things like the prisons overflowing. For the first time in Danish history, they don't have enough space for all of the criminals. And who, pray tell, are the people incarcerated at such a prodigious rate? Did the Danish people collectively go insane and go on out on mass robbery sprees? Maybe the rage virus broke out or something. No. It is exactly what your racist mind thinks it is. Despite making up 14% of the population, so close to the meme, the imported bully boys and ruffians make up a third of the violent criminals. And since too many people are noticing, the solution, just like in the Shire, is collective punishment and guilt. The problem is not the huge numbers of imported violent criminals. The problem is whiteness. The problem is the conservative hobbit and his lack of a welcoming, diverse world view. The problem is that we are not liberal enough, that we all don't simply embrace the uniform, monolithic worldview required to close our eyes tightly enough to ignore reality. We are going to have to fix this with cultural shame, of course. And the ruffians too are not at all shy about letting the rat folk know it. They are openly racist towards the hobbits, and far above the law, regularly beating the hobbits if they act out, or try to protest against the open theft of their produce or land. They put it as if they have to do this now. The hobbits are getting uppity, and if they know what's best for them, they will learn their place before a ruffian needs to remind them. Yet again, in our world, that sounds almost quaint. At least the ruffians are doing it for a reason. Greed. They are terrible people, to be sure, but they are in essence just bullies. Bullies who have found some form of weakness that they themselves can now use to extract resources from. And when faced with someone willing to fight back, like the 4 hero hobbits, they quickly back down again. It's terrible, sure, but it's understandable. Whilst for us, the economic criminals are the least of our worries. Sure, uncontrolled mass immigration is tapping our treasuries at an astonishing rate, but what is far worse is the fact that it is becoming very difficult indeed to refute the assertions made by many on social media that monsters walk among us. Driven not by simple greed or avarice, no motivation that our rational mind can comprehend, but just pure, simple savagery, the likes of which nightmares are made of. But what is even worse than the crime, or even the societal errors of tolerance that made the crime possible in the first place, is the system that protects the criminal. J.R.R. Brown was arrested 14 times, officially diagnosed and prescribed medication which he simply refused to take. Even his own mother sought for him to be involuntarily hospitalized for forced treatment. His family were so afraid of him, they sent him off to live in a homeless shelter. And when he finally did what he had been given every repeated opportunity to do so by our modern system, actually end up killing someone, the system yet again moves to protect him. As the latest at the time of recording of this video is that he has been found incompetent to stand trial, meaning the system has deemed him incapable of being legally responsible for his actions and must be sent to the social system to be cared for and restored. Remember, the purpose of a system is what it does. That is its nature. And personally, I'm not entirely sure I want him to be restored. I'm starting to think that restoring him may actually be pure and undiluted cruelty to every innocent person he has, and in all due sad probability will hurt. And I say will, because this is a problem far larger than the actually insane. We may well entertain the idea that J.R.R. Brown was genuinely crazy. It does nothing to restore the credibility of the system that let him walk loose. But it is at least a personal defense. The liberal system of accountability is, however, far more fundamentally broken than that. And you might not think that's possible. How could anything get worse? Last year, in Austria, a migrant man was convicted of facilitating and participating in the 17-man gang rape of a 12-year-old girl. His defense in court was, and I quote, "I plead partially guilty. I thought if she was 12 and I was 15, it was allowed." He also released a video on his TikTok where he also wrote, quote, "She gangbanged 15 guys, posts videos, do you want videos, ha 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 ha." He further defended his actions by stating that she had cheated on him at ski camp. I tell you all of this not to shock you or to make you uncomfortable, but so you can better appreciate what I'm about to tell you next. The titanic insanity of his conviction, as the judge sentenced him to 15 months probation and a £670 fine. The story, believe it or not if you will, actually gets worse. But I think I have made my point without needing to expose you to anything more for now. As the point very clearly made, I believe, is that we in the West do not have a justice system anymore. At least not in any meaningful way. And on the off occasion, when the crime is simply too much to be ignored, simply too difficult to brush under the carpet and excuse, which still does happen, at least sometimes, small mercies and all that, what does our media do? Our societal representatives, the people with the microphones. What do they do? What message do they broadcast to the rest of us? They make a series about a young white boy killing girls. Frankly, Frodo and Sam got off easy in this respect. The humiliation, however, does not end there. The countryside itself is under threat, too, with the wanton destruction of the landscape and the tearing down of old hobbit houses and monuments, replacing them with deathly pale bricked buildings, complete with sad little narrow windows barely illuminated from within. And near Bag End, the party tree is torn down and uprooted in an act of simple, vicious vandalism. The old mill, too, once water-powered and used to grind the grain from the fields, is now belching out dark smoke on account of its upgrades. But with all the grain hauled off anyways to be sold by the bully boys, there is no grain to feed the mill. The ugly thing just sits there purely to further scar and destroy the landscape whilst polluting the river. This too has its parallels, from the tearing down of statues and cultural monuments to the deliberate destruction of power grids via Germany's abandonment of nuclear energy. And as the requirement, the need for energy did not drop, of course, this led to a dire need to find new sources, leading in turn to enormous digging projects tearing up the landscape, villages, and old cultural buildings. Not for the actually necessary purpose of powering the nation, it was already powered by nuclear power plants, but seemingly only as an act of malicious destruction. And there too is another final similarity. It is revealed that the shadowy character behind all of this destruction, all of this desecration, a person called Sharky, is none other than Sauron, the disgraced White Wizard. And why is he doing this? Why did he flee all the way to the Shire? Why did he escape his confinement, all for the simple acts of wanton cruelty that he is now carrying out? Simple, petty malice. He states so openly and unashamedly. He did this expressly to get his revenge on the hobbits for no other reason than that he disliked them in particular, that he disliked the look of them and their innocence. It seems so simple that it can't possibly be true. Why would anyone ever be so cruel for such a petty reason? But therein lies another lesson. We must be willing to accept it for what it is. There are, in fact, things and forces in this world that are just plainly evil, motivated by hatred and spite. How does one even begin to deal with something like this? Excellent question. And it is actually another one that the book asks too. Sam, Pippin, and Merry all argue immediately that they need to liberate the Shire. They must fight. Indeed, the fight is inevitable, they say, and they must be ready to kill if necessary. They are eager for it, threatening violence on multiple occasions already. But Frodo, the ring-bearer, is hesitant. He argues again and again that whilst action must be taken, violence is not the only answer. And whilst he too agrees to face the ruffians with weapons, he spends almost all of this time arguing yet again for restraint. He never draws his sword, even when Saruman stabs him in the end. The dagger shatters harmlessly on Frodo's mithril vest, and as the other hobbits furiously bear Saruman to the ground and make as if to kill him, Frodo stops them, declaring that he had taken no harm, and that Saruman had to be respected for the man he once was, and let go. There is a chilling parallel there in how many of us often argue for the old ways, the old traditions of tolerance, dialogue, of caring for one another and to be actually charitable towards one opposition, and the inherent value we place in many institutions, even when they, like the court system for example, repeatedly and demonstrably fail to uphold those once proud and honourable traditions. Now, in the Scouring of the Shire, it is Grima Wormtongue who kills Saruman shortly thereafter, having been exposed to one too many barbed taunts from the old wizard. It all makes me think that Frodo is me. Frodo is a lot of us who have spent the last decade arguing from points of principle. We must be better than the enemy, more moral, more magnanimous, more consistent to our principles, our ideals, and our belief, and eager, therefore, to return to a better time. I still believe that, and whilst I have been dragged kicking and screaming by the left year by year now to a more and more strident position, I still believe we can win by being better than them, and I wholly believe we are winning on those grounds, and that we must win with these principles intact, lest we spoil and waste our very victory in its entirety. Because unlike the Shire, where control can be wrested back and things set straight again just by seeing off 100 or so poorly armed thugs, our situation is significantly more complicated.
We will not let fear win. A world without trans people has never existed. A world without drag has never existed, and it never will. Queer people have always been here amongst us. They are our coworkers, they are our brothers, our sisters, they are our mothers, our fathers, they are our families. Drag is art, drag is culture, drag is educational, drag is creative, drag is comedy, but drag is not a crime. My name is Scarlett Boa, and thank you so much for your time.
The thugs are in power, and picking up a sword and waving it around at disillusioned bullies just isn't going to work here. Not only are they in power, but no matter how utterly beyond barking mad, batshit insane they may appear, a frightening portion of them are so deeply indoctrinated and under so many levels of self-incrimination that dialogue is simply not possible. Not that it is not an option, it is quite literally impossible. In the same way that a human would struggle mightily to explain the concept of land to a fish. At the same time, too, we also lack the luxury of a Grima Wormtongue. Someone that can see done what is necessary to do, but morally objectionable, and in such a way as to keep the blood clear of our hands. At the end of the day, there are no simple solutions to all of this. It is not so simple as to merely discard our principles and to do what Grima did. That in and of itself would see us fail equally as hard as our opposition once did. Indeed, our opposition is perfectly represented by Grima Wormtongue himself and his plunging fall from grace. Simultaneously, simply turning the other cheek is also not a solution, as has been demonstrated repeatedly over the course of 10 years of near universally one-sided aggression, not to mention the preceding decades before that again. In reality, all that awaits us is probably another 10 years of culture war to restore what was lost, or at the very least so close as for it to be an adequate replacement. But, with all of that being said, I ask you still to take heart from another sentence from the book, shortly after the defeat of Sharky and his goons. Quote, "The clearing up certainly needed a lot of work, but it took less time than Sam had feared." Our clearing up is going to require a lot of work too, and quite a bit of time as well. But it will be done. And when it is done, it will feel like it took no time at all. Until next time, I have been Arch. Thank you all very much for watching, and I hope to see you all again soon. Till then, have a good day.